thousands of people from around the world have started or led different religions and cults. My question today is, which one of these religious leaders was the most influential? Let's find out. Religion dominates the world. Roughly 85% of the world identifies as religious. And even that 15% that doesn't identify as religious still have spiritual practices or beliefs that they flesh out in their daily lives. Most religions, especially the two big giants, Christianity and Islam, have plenty of religious leaders in their history. Pretty much all religious leaders are revered by their followers, and many of them had a significant impacts on the world we live in today. So how am I going to determine which religious leaders were the most impactful? Well, I have a certain sort of criteria that I'll be using today. I factored in whether or not they were the founder of the religion, how big the religion is to date, what sort of input they had into the religion, and also their general influence on the world and other religions across the board. So let's get started off with number 5 being Moses. Moses wasn't a religious founder by any traditional standard. He was, however, a significant Jewish leader who helped bring structure politically and religiously to a relatively unstructured Jewish faith. He lived around the 1300 BC era, and he's probably most well known for being the author/writer of the first 5 books found in the Old Testament. Because of his prophetic influence, he is revered by Jews, Christians, and Muslims alike. The crazy thing is that the 5 books Moses wrote are still foundational texts today, used by Christians and Jews alike. And although Muslims don't fully trust the Bible, they still revere and respect Moses as a significant prophet. And outside of the 3 big monotheistic religions, there are other smaller Abrahamic religions that also revere and respect Moses as a significant leader and religious teacher. And that is why Moses is number 5, because it's not often that someone who lived thousands of years ago becomes world-renowned thousands of years later. Moving on to number 4 is Buddha. Buddha helped found a religion that now claims up to 500 million followers. His teachings have been used to outline the faith for monks in the East living in the mountains, as well as mystics in the West living in the city. Splitting off from Hinduism and adapting that faith, Buddha probably couldn't envision the sort of impact he would have on the world to come. His philosophies and teachings have been shared across the world, published millions of times, and have been read by many a scholar. However, probably one of the most significant things about Buddha's teachings and practices is that they have interwoven with pretty much every other sort of faith or practice or spirituality out there in some way, shape, or form. What he taught about yoga, what he taught about meditation, what he taught about life in general has been included in secular lifestyles, have been included in other religions, have been included across the world, and has been very much generally diffused across all religious practices. This is especially obvious in things like the New Age movement or spiritual practices that don't necessarily have a strict dogma. So although Buddha did not start a religion that claims over 1 billion followers to date, starting a religion that now claims over 500 million is still a rare accomplishment, making him the number 4 most influential leader spiritually in the world. Number 3, Abraham. Most people don't go on a journey expecting to father 2 children who would end up becoming the patriarchs of the 2 largest religions to come. Christianity and Judaism's origin story really starts with Abraham. Although Adam and Eve were considered the first people on earth according to those traditions, Abraham is really where the religions seem to take root and start to sprout, with their beliefs and their fundamentals as of what they practice. That is why in many traditions, Abraham is seen kind of as the first major prophet who has a really close relationship with God. And of course, Muslims also believe that their descendancy goes back to Abraham as well. Specifically, they believe their ancestry goes back to Ishmael, who happened to be one of Abraham's sons. On the flip side, Jews and Christians trace their ancestry back to Isaac, the other son of Abraham. If both religious traditions have any merit, then the Bible was accurate when it stated, "You will be the father of many nations. No longer will you be called Abram, your name will be called Abraham, for I have made you a father of many nations. I'll make you very fruitful. I will make nations of you, and kings will come from you." That's from Genesis 17, 4-6. It's also significant to mention that over 50% of the world claim to be followers of an Abrahamic religion of some sort. An Abrahamic religion, for anyone who may not know, is a religion that traces its roots back to Abraham. This consists of the main 3 traditional monotheistic religions: Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, plus some other smaller sectors such as Druze and stuff like that. Abraham was so influential that over half the world follows a religion that claims to go back to him, and that's why he is number 3. But there are 2 other people I think that are even more significant than Abraham as far as their influence goes. And let's go on to number 2, Muhammad. Roughly 1500 years ago, Muhammad helped dictate the Quran to his followers, the supposed words of Allah himself as delivered by angels. That may seem like a long time ago, but when compared to other religious leaders on this list, such as Abraham, who is believed to have existed like over 4,000 years ago, that is actually relatively young for a religion. In the span of less than 2,000 years, Muhammad helped start a religion that is now the 2nd largest in the world and currently the fastest growing. To date, Islam has nearly 2 billion adherents from across the world. Abraham and Moses may have helped influence the beliefs of over 4 billion people, but with over double the amount of time. Muhammad accomplished nearly the same amount of influence as they did in less than half the time. And even according to this book that I have in my hand right now, that God is Not One by Stephen Prothero, even he claims that currently to date, Islam is probably the most influential religion in the world. So that is why I have placed Muhammad here at number 2 on the top 5 most influential religious leaders to date. But who is number 1? Who could compete with Muhammad? Well, I think most people probably already know who number 1 is before I even say it. Number 1, Jesus. This probably comes as no surprise because this name is probably the most well-known name from around the world as far as religious leaders are concerned. There's hardly a country or city that hasn't been touched by this name at some point in its lifetime. The only other religious leader that may have even somewhat of a similar level of notoriety as Jesus would be probably Abraham himself, who has been incorporated in most monotheistic religions. But even then, Jesus is one of the religious leaders that first comes to most people's minds. And also, much like Muhammad, Jesus is much younger than Abraham, Moses, and Buddha, who lived thousands and thousands of years ago. Rather, Jesus only lived about 2,000 years ago and helped start, or was the founder of one of the biggest religions in the world today, or the biggest religion in the world today, Christianity. Jesus is the central figure of Christianity, being seen as Lord and Savior of the world. That also means he is the central figure in the best-selling book in the world to date, namely the Bible, which has sold over 5 billion books worldwide and is constantly selling millions and millions every year. And over 2.2 billion people from across the world identify as Christians. And as earlier said, making it the largest religion in the world. And as of now, it is still a rapidly growing religion, although still not as fast as Islam. Much like other figures that are in the Bible, especially in the Old Testament, Jesus can be found in the Quran as well. Jesus is viewed as a significant prophet in Islam. Some Muslims would even go as far as saying Jesus is one of the only perfect prophets in Islam, although they do not believe that Jesus is God or Savior like Christians would. And according to Islamic theology, they believe Jesus will be coming back at some point when the end times arrive. But unlike some of these other Abrahamic leaders and religious leaders that I mentioned earlier, Jesus can be found in other places from across the world. So for instance, even some Hindus believe Jesus is one of their gods. Plus many cults, tribal religions, and other sort of traditions, such as like Jehovah's Witnesses, incorporate Jesus into their tradition. And they view him in many different ways, ranging from prophet to teacher to God to an alien to some other strange things. Paintings, statues, toys, icons, books, movies, TV shows. So much commerce or money has been spent on different portrayals of Jesus, making him very iconic or recognizable, especially in the Western world, but even in the Eastern world as well. And for this reason, Jesus may not only be one of the most influential religious leaders of all time, he would also arguably be one of the most influential people of all time. So, that is my top 5 list of the most influential religious leaders to date. Let me know if you agree or disagree in the comments down below, and tell me what your list is. Who do you think are the top 5 most influential religious leaders of all time? I'm going to pop up on the screen just a list of names that I think are honorable mentions that I didn't get to put on the top 5 list because I didn't think they quite made it. Share with me if you think any of those deserved to get a higher ranking than they did. Thank you for watching. As always, if you like this video, leave a comment, like, and subscribe to join the Light the World community. And as always, before I close out, friends, go out there yourselves and light the world.